We've got big plans for the small boat. We're learning as we go. So come along, we'll teach you stuff as we go building Windpuff.
When it comes to YouTube channels stripping a deck, or stripping anything on the boat, you always see them sanding. And they're using an orbital sander because, a random orbital sander, because it creates a nice, smooth, even surface on everything once you finally sand through all those many layers of stuff you're sanding through. And I always see in the comments, hey, why don't you use an angle grinder? You'll chop through that so much faster. And the simple answer is because you're going to end up gouging it. Because if you use a regular angle grinder disc, like this guy, you're forced to kind of slide from the side. And what you're going to do is you're going to create a bunch of half moons all the way along and just make a mess. But it got me wondering, is there a better way? So I did some Googling, did some watching YouTube reviews of different options, and I found a couple options, and I'm going to try them and see which one works. And then that's the one we're going to do everywhere. So the first one is this little quick strip disc. So this is good for taking paint off of metals and stuff like that. And I think it should work well to take the paint and maybe the gel coat off the top of the deck. Because our boat is gel coat and then it's also painted. So we gotta get all of that off, that way we're down to bare glass. Now you can bond the gel coat because gel coat is really just polyester resin with coloring agents in there. So like there's no difference bonding gel coat versus bonding to the glass that's underneath of it from a polyester to polyester bond standpoint. Now there's other reasons that you guys are gonna let everyone know in the comments about why you shouldn't do that, but you can do it. I've talked to boat builders about it, and there's no reason you can't do it. It's just not how everyone does it, so therefore everyone continues to do it the way everyone else does it, because otherwise someone's going to call them out and say they're doing it wrong. But anyway, quick strip. I'm going to try this, see how that works. If this guy takes it off nice and easily, excellent. It literally looks like a giant Scotch-Brite pad on steroids that you can hook up to your angle grinder. The next one we're going to try is a grinding wheel grinder guy. So this just has diamond coarseness to it, and it's like sandpaper in metal. Let's see how that goes. And then lastly, a terrifying looking creature. This guy looks like a slotted rotor on a race car. So this is for masonry. It's for leveling concrete and smoothing that stuff down. So yes, it will chop through the fiberglass, but the question is, will it take off a layer or will it just punch a hole in the hull? So we will try these out very gently. Now, an important point to why you can't use a grinder, but yet now here I am using a grinder. When people use a grinder to take stuff down, they do this. They grind with the side of the disc. And when you do that, you will create this bottom portion, like you're going to create that shape in it. What you need to do is go flat. But the problem is, in the middle of this thing is a hub and everything that locks it onto the grinder. So you can't actually just put this down flat and grind. That's why all of these guys, if you notice, they're kind of cup shaped. They're very thick. So that way, all the attachment hardware is so far up there that you're in the clear. And this guy especially, this is precisely made for leveling and making stuff flat. So it is, you put it down and just chop things away. So we're going to use all three. We're going to skip the original grinding plate, that's for other stuff. And we're going to see what happens, see which one works best, and take it from there.
So there was the like plastic one that looked like an epic Scotch-Brite pad. There was this guy that looked like a little evil demon thing. And then there was this one which looked like metal sandpaper, you could say. Well, honestly, they each had their benefits, but I had a clear favorite, and it was this one that just looks like sandpaper. This one is the quietest. When you're grinding, it doesn't sound as horribly loud. Now, I had ear protection in for all of them, but this guy just was generally quieter. The problem is, it rubs off really fast. Like, you wear this sucker down to the plastic frame in not very long. So this is an option, but you're gonna go through a lot of these guys. With these two, they both cut about the same. So they do quick work of the stuff. This one is so much louder than this one. The one that's got these little blades on it. So this guy's actually for grinding stone. It's for masonry, to level stone out. So it does a great job. It chews right through the gel coat. A little bit slower than this one as well. But it chews through, it gives you a nice flat surface. Like, it works well. But it's loud and it vibrates and it's just not as comfortable to work with. Where this guy is just literally epic sandpaper on steroids fused into metal. So, honestly, this was my go-to. Now, in the beginning, I was good, and I was, grinding flat everywhere. But it's not as fast as if you do it wrong, and you just go, and you just kind of tip the grinder a little. Not that much, like just a smidge. And you just grind through. And I noticed I started doing this when I was more tired, because instead of putting the weight evenly on the grinder and having like a nice flat grinding area, I would kind of weigh down on one corner where the two handles were, and it took it off really fast. Now the reason that's not good is I am making slight dishes in the, or slight ruts in the whole deck. So I'm grinding through and it's not gonna be perfectly smooth, which was the whole point of doing it this way in the first place. But we're going to be putting new layers of glass on everything on the deck. We're going to be rebuilding the entire deck anyway. So I started off doing it the right way, where everything was nice and flat and level, and then I did it kind of tipping it to the side anyway. I think this guy was getting a little dull towards the end on the flat parts because either I was tired or it just felt like it was going faster if I tipped onto fresh grit that wasn't used before. So that's
that's how that went. So this guy was my main workhorse. Now, I started off fruitlessly, thinking that I could vacuum the dust as I went. And that proved to be hilarious. So in no time, the filter was clogged and the vacuum didn't run anymore, and I had like barely any of the deck ground off. So I just decided to become a dust mite, and I just ground everything off and then swept it into piles and then sucked those piles into the thing and then into the shop vac and then took that out to the dumpster. So it got there. It was a huge mess in the process, and I didn't get everything ground off that we need ground, but I was done grinding. Like I'd been grinding for I don't even know how many days, and it was just I didn't want to keep doing it. I wanted to move on to the next step. So we still have the sides of the deck house to grind off. When we get to that point, when we're filling in the windows and start building the hard dodger, all that, then we'll worry about that stuff. But for now, we got the flat parts of the deck ground off. We're building the bulwarks. We're then gonna go finishing the transom extension, getting that attached to the boat, and be done with the build. Like we're advancing. We're moving along quickly. That way we can get this build finished. That way we can go sailing as soon as possible, which is still a few years away. So we got the whole deck stripped down. We got all the fiberglass ground down to just bare glass. The gel coat is gone. So now we can actually look at the deck and see, are there any changes in the color of it to see what's the condition of the core under it. Now the main reason for this was two main reasons. One, we're making so many changes to the deck, instead of grinding the specific area we're working when we're working there, just take it all off. Because we're going to be doing something everywhere. So we might as well just get it stripped down in one very nasty, very dirty mess go of a job. Now, the second reason is as I walk around the deck, there's some areas that give a little, some that are a little squishy, and I don't know what is the normal amount of give for the deck, because in doing rig surveys on many boats, I've seen some boats, they flex quite a bit when you step in certain spots, just because that's how the boat is made. There's nothing wrong with that boat, it's just that spot moves. Now, I'm coming from Wisdom, which has a deck that's over 2 inches thick, and 1.5 inches of it is plywood. So it's an incredibly thick deck, and it has no give. So then when I'm walking around on this one, I'm like, now that it's my boat and not someone else's boat, I'm like, is this normal? Should it be giving here? So the best way to check it all is to check it all. So we stripped the whole deck off, and you can actually see areas where the color changes drastically. So I didn't know what to expect. I just assumed that I would find a correlation as I went, and it turned out to be true. So the areas that don't look so good are very pale in color, and the areas that are doing just fine are like a nice deep rich amber color. So now what we're gonna do is just drill a bunch of holes in the stuff to see what's the real difference, like aside from just what's the color difference. So we're gonna get that done. Second thing we did is we pulled out all of the chain plates. Now I have very strong reason to believe that these chain plates are original, which puts them at 59 years old. And I wanted to illustrate a couple points on this. One, when you inspect the chain plate in place on the deck, you can see this part above the deck and this part below the deck, sometimes. The area that tends to crack and just give way with no warning is this little section that's inside the deck. And looking at them, some of them look like they have the beginnings of cracks forming in them. So that's the whole issue with having internal chain plates, is there is a section of the chain plate that is impossible to inspect without doing this, pulling the chain plate out and looking at it. And this is a whole lot of work. So that's why when we put the new chain plates on, they're going to be external chain plates. That way, just like on Wisdom, you look at them, there they are, they're in good shape, good to roll. Now, the second point that I want to illustrate with the chain plates is actually some information that you can find in my book that's coming out. And you can pre-order it now. It's going to print, or it's going to be available to purchase in March. But it's how big should your chain plate bolt holes be, and how many chain plate bolts do you need? That's the important question. So what you want to do is you figure out what's the load that's going to be on the chain plate. Now, that then dictates this thickness, like what is the box cross-sectional area of the metal, because the metal has its properties and you need enough of it to hold. Now, in that cross-sectional area, you see there's no mention, like it doesn't care how long is the chain plate, it's just how thick and how wide. The reason that the length doesn't matter is because the length is whatever length you need to get it to fit your fasteners and get where it needs to get. Now, how many fasteners do you need? Well, if you notice, this hole is much bigger than these 3 little holes. And the reason is, the load that's on this chain plate, like that the stay's putting on it, is then split over X number of fasteners. If you have space for 5, you can do 5 small fasteners. Because the 5 together, their total strength adds up to be enough to hold the load. Now, if you don't fit 5 and you're going to fit fewer, well, you're going to go bigger. So what it is the total, the amount of load that the stay is going to be put under, that the chain plate needs to be able to resist, that total load needs to be divided up by all those fasteners. So that literally tells you, if you need 10,000 pounds of resistance to the chain plate, so you're going to put a 10,000 pound load on this and it can't move. Well, if you have 5 chain plate bolts, each one has to be able to hold at least 2,000 pounds. If you're going to make it less, they better be able to hold more, because each one is going to be taking more load. So if you're going to have 10 bolts, each bolt just needs to hold 1,000 pounds. So that's how you go sizing it. Now, personally, I like to be on the extra super safe side on things, so I like to size it for whatever you need and then have an extra bolt hole. So in a situation like this where you're going to have 3 bolts, I would size it so that 2 of the bolts could hold it, and then this guy's just gravy. So that way, if something goes bad, it's not then, you know, a doomsday situation. So that's just a little tangent on chain plate bolt sizing that I wanted to show you guys, because what better illustration than an actual chain plate.
Thanks for watching this episode of Sailing Wisdom. Don't forget to like the video, share it with your friends, and hit subscribe so you don't miss the next Rigging Doctor episode. And if you're interested in even more Rigging Doctor awesomeness, consider becoming a patron to see all of our extras. Can't wait to see you next time as you join us out here on the high seas.